it's often that you think about domestic abuse as being physical violence, but you say that the violence happened a lot later. But what are some of the other forms of abuse that you experienced?
I experienced the verbal and mental abuse very early on, and then it quickly escalated to physical abuse. And these sort of types of abuses are sometimes hard to identify, whether it be through the words, through the physical behaviour, through financial control, through manipulation of your thought processes. So it's not actually something that you can physically pinpoint as a bruise. It's something that's done at a psychological level.
So can we say that even things like abusive language, threatening words, that is classed as a form of violence?
Yep, absolutely. All of it. All of that is classed as a form of violence. And even controlling someone's way of what they wear and how they tie their hair up and if they wear makeup. All these subtle things can, if consistently done, can be conceived as a form of violence.
So I guess it's just any form of restricting the freedom of another person and exerting your own control over them.
And also it comes down to the frequency and the extent of the behaviour. In a relationship, you're bound to have ideas of how you think things should be done, and the other person may disagree, but it's allowing someone the respect and the freedom to do things their way, and sometimes having your say but not enforcing that on someone else.
Because I suppose that's a scenario that comes up in any marriage where you're going to come across a difference of opinion or a different way of doing things, but the respect that you have for each other means that there's always a level of compromise. I suppose the point at which you have no more compromise left within you, that you always want to exert your control, that's where some of these abusive behaviors start coming out, even if it's just being manipulative and making sure that the other person always gives in, or saying things or forcing them to do what you want them to do.
Yeah. Perpetrators use this as a form of gaining power and empowerment over their partner, to massage their ego or to make them feel superior. And the only way they can do that is making someone feel inferior and somebody bowing down to them, to belittle someone, to control them, to dictate.
Is it ever okay to make someone do something against their own will?
In my opinion, no. I don't see how anybody has the right to dictate and enforce their power over somebody.
I wonder in a family situation how many times that occurs where, for example, if there are a couple who are having an argument, one of you might turn around and say, right, I'm putting my foot down. Is that a form of abuse? Because the other person then is forced to compromise. Abuse for me is the point at which it just becomes too one-sided. It's always leaning towards one person. It's always one person giving in. There's too much control from one side of the relationship.
I would ask a series of questions. I mean, how often is this happening for me? Where is there a positive outcome for me as well as the other person? Am I comfortable with this? Is this going to serve our relationship? And if it's going to serve our relationship, is it going to be a positive impact on me, or is it going to be detrimental to my mental health or to my emotional or my level of free will? I would ask myself a series of questions, and from that, just making a judgment from those sincere answers, you'll be able to identify how and what your tolerance levels are.
I suppose that word tolerance is really key. It's the point at which you feel like it's something that's impacting your life.
Yeah. And just, how do I feel about it? Do I feel happy about this? I mean, we're not always right. Our partners can be right, as much as we want to admit it or not. But, it's just that process of, okay, you're right in this instance. I need to just back down because it's my ego at play here.
Even with children, we do have to encourage them and in some instances force them to do things that they don't want to. They don't want to do their homework. They don't want to go to school. So answering the question of, do you have to do things sometimes for people against their will? Again, whether you can say a blanket yes or no to that, it depends on the individual situation.
There's a really interesting quote by Oprah. She says, anytime you are restricted from being who you want to be and you are suppressing yourself to act in a way that other people want you to act. That's abuse. I take that as a great general sort of guide for people to start reflecting upon themselves. But going back to your point about children, you're right, we often do make children do things that they don't want to do. But again, maybe we have to empower children to ask themselves their own questions about how they feel, and allow space for communication so they can actually try and reflect on, how is this in the long term impacting me?
It's interesting because even in a loving, healthy relationship, there will be preferences of what you like the other person to do. So, for example, I know my mother-in-law is very happy to see me wearing Indian suits, and she loves to see me wearing beautiful Indian suits. And I will happily wear them for her on certain occasions because I know it will please her. But I'm not somebody who generally tends to wear Indian suits very much. If I can avoid it, I will, because it's more of a faff with the chunni and everything. So it's an example of where you're doing something not because it's me and it's defining me as a person, but it's to please somebody else. And in any loving, healthy relationship, there is an element of that.
That's compromise, isn't it?
It's compromise.
You have to give and take. I mean, wearing an Indian suit, how much is that really going to affect you in the long run?
Yeah.
To give somebody else a form of happiness is a form of seva. And, you know, just to do small bits like that's not, in my opinion, something that should really impact you so much.
I suppose the individual will have to decide, because there may be another person for whom that same scenario is completely damaging. And it isn't for us to then judge another person and say, well, just get on with it. They have to really be allowed to express their own emotions and say, this just isn't working for me, and I need to be able to have a clear avenue to discuss this, or to express myself in a certain way.